Hello everyone, and welcome back to Andy's fun-filled, fantastic farming adventures. And let me tell you what, we have another treat today. This time it was not in the form of frost or snow, so maybe we count our blessings there. What it was in the form of, though, was icy projectiles falling from the sky violently, which may be even worse in some cases. It's probably best that we run over and scout all of the fields that we think have damage from the hailstorm. Personally, I would rather not look at all, but we gotta start making preparations. If it's bad enough, we will have to go do some more field work. Today is Friday. The storm happened yesterday, Thursday afternoon, and actually, as a matter of fact, it was our second storm within 4 days where we had a tornado warning. Not a tornado watch, but a warning. That means that there was actually extremely severe weather and funnel clouds spotted in the area. So these storms were no joke, and we got them both within 4 days of each other. The first storm, which we got on Monday, seemed like it was going to be pretty bad. We'll take a little time hop back and look at that real quick. Well, folks, we're in for a treat tonight. We got an absolutely nasty storm coming in here. That is Mattoon, which is where I live. We are southwest of Mattoon, which is where our farm is. And let me tell you, that is one hell of a storm. Oh my gosh. And to think, there was snow on the ground less than 2 weeks ago. When I got here, I think Dad is over at the big barns chaining the doors down. I heard the tornado sirens a second ago in Mattoon. We've got the overhead door at Dad's open. I pulled my truck in. Like I said, Dad's ratcheting down the barns as fast as he can and as strong as he can to secure them for the wind. And he's gonna pull in there, shut the barn, run in the house. The calm before the storm. It's coming. We are hoping for the best outcome out of the storm. I should have mentioned how good our crops look. I think I may have jinxed us. I guarantee you all these people are out storm watching. A lot to see. One other thing Dad did was unhook the four-wheel drive tractors that were sitting out, pull them into our big machine shed. The one good thing about this, though, is that we probably won't need to power wash our field cultivators because they're outside. The best water is free. Should be coming across the countryside any minute. We may have missed the worst of it. Meanwhile, some brave soul is traveling down the road. Look at that car, just no fear going head first into this. Did we miss the wind then?
That's it, it's almost south. It split right over it.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
Yeah, you will this summer.
It pretty much ended up being a non-event. 4/10 of rain in less than 30 minutes. Other than that, though, no severe winds or hail that we saw. I'm sure there was somewhere, though. That storm was all hype and no show, which I'm not complaining about. Now let's take a little look at what happened yesterday.
That's a pretty good hail. Cooled off.
It's been hailing for at least 5 minutes and has not stopped. Not huge hail by any means, but it just keeps coming down. That storm was a random pop-up storm, wasn't really forecasted to be much, and it turned out to be a little bit more violent, especially to our poor little seedlings out in the field. If you're wondering, that hail lasted 10 minutes. So all of our crops around here were getting bombarded for over 10 minutes with very small pea-sized hail. What is fortunate about that, at least here at the farm where that video was shot, is that it was very soft. If it had been harder and had more weight to it, it would have been much worse. I can guarantee you, without even looking at the corn and soybeans around here, that we do have some minor crop damage. I'm not as worried about this, though, as I am about a few of our farms to the west. Let's just say that we got the PG version here at home, and over west, they got the R version of that storm. I've already received some intel on the status of our crops over there, and let me tell you, it's not pretty. You know it's a pretty bad day when paying your input bills is not the worst part of your afternoon. Whew. Let's go hop in the truck, take a look. It looks like we have another storm brewing today. We haven't really gotten that much rain. I would say the total from the 2 storms, maybe a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch of rain. Not that much for a week. Probably 2/10 of that was in hail. There is a little bit of a silver lining though. Our field cultivators got rinsed off pretty nicely. Unfortunately though, if we find some bad hail damage, they may get dirty again. It's probably best just to drive west here and dive headfirst into this mess. I can tell you all before we get here that the cornfield we're headed to has been absolutely smoked by hail. We have arrived, and I can tell from the truck that this is not good. It is a little bit breezy outside, so I do apologize if we have any kind of audio issues out here. I was not lying. This corn is in very bad shape. I'll let you see for yourselves though. Got absolutely mangled. It didn't get chopped off at the ground, but it's bent over. Leaves are completely tore apart. Next one got chopped off. That one's mangled, chopped off, mangled, chopped off, chopped off, chopped off, mangled, mangled, mangled. I mean, it's all like that. There's not a single plant out here in this field, and I'm willing to bet this, that does not have hail damage. And pretty severe hail damage at that. Leaf tissue damage on that one. Another one laid over, possibly chopped off, gonna be bruised, chopped off. I just walked across this entire field. There is millions and millions of corn plants out here, and there's not one little seedling out here that didn't get damaged. It's unfortunate. They all look like this, just beat to death. Chopped off at the ground, chopped off on top, beat up. Looks like someone came out here with a meat tenderizer and just went to work. Yesterday was a bad day to be a corn plant out in this field. Someone forgot to turn the blender off. Look at this, look at these leaves. You really hate to see that. One of the best stands of corn we've ever had in this field. I'd say we planted 35,000 plants per acre, and we had 35,000 plants per acre. And every single one of them got dinged. I keep journeying farther and farther into the field, hoping I'm going to find some relief, maybe a spot where the corn's all right, and no, not at all. Whole field's smoked out here. A horrible sight to see, that's for sure. It doesn't matter where you go. Beat up, knocked down, cut off. Nothing like a good old hailstorm. Oh, would you look at that? I found one with minimal damage. A little split in this leaf. Punch holes. For the most part though, that one's all right. I'll at least try to make this nightmare a learning opportunity for you in terms of agronomics. Right here you have a corn plant that I would say based on the rest of the field is at V1, maybe close to V2 in terms of growth stage. That means that it's getting close to its second collared leaf, still extremely young in its life cycle. And that is very important as we evaluate damage out here in the field. And I think I just damaged him a little bit more. Because all these corn plants are at such an early stage in their life, their growing point is actually still below the soil surface. That is, all of the plant tissue is still emerging above ground as opposed to elongating up, which is what it does once it gets past to V5, V6, maybe V7 depending on the corn hybrid. What that means is over the next few days to a week, all of this tissue will die off that was very severely damaged, and hopefully the corn plant will start to shoot out new growth out of the top. All of this early growth though is probably going to die. Twisted leaves, cut in half. If we were to come out here in 10 days, we would see a lot of dead plant material. Kind of look like all this soybean residue from last season. And I'm optimistic that we would see new growth coming out of the top. We aren't accumulating very many growing degree units right now. It's not getting super warm during the day, maybe 65 to 70, which is going to slow this recovery process down. In terms of long-term yield impact, it is hard to say whether or not this is going to hurt us. It very well could take 10 to 15% off our top end yield, or these corn plants can restart their vegetative growth with little to no penalty. You can consider that a positive note if you want, but there is nothing at all good about this happening to corn plants. A very interesting phenomenon I'm seeing out here a lot is it looks like the corn plant was hailed over and then hailstones landed on top of the corn leaves that were already against the ground and pinned them in the soil. If you watch here, I'm going to pull these leaves out of the ground. The hail had pushed them into the ground, basically burrowing it in. It must have been pretty bad out here. One of the only times it's unfortunate to also farm soybeans across the road. The nice gentleman who lives right by this farm must have been coming home from work, and he stopped here to flag me down, and he showed me a video that his wife took of the hail, and there was about 3 inches of hail on the ground. That's wild. I don't know if I was just optimistic or stupid. I walked a lot of this farm thinking maybe it would be better than the cornfield on the south side of the road, and if anything, it was worse. This is not in good shape. Just all the way across the farm, a lot of this completely chopped off plants. Only a stem remaining there. This one's pretty much chopped off at the ground, if you can't see. A little bit of tissue attached. Bent over, bruised, chopped off, 1 cotyledon remaining. That's important. Chopped off on top, 1 cotyledon left. Cotyledons all over the field, which are the 2 true seed leaves. These are very important for the soybean plant. Just not in good shape. Horrific to see. Might as well learn a little bit about the severity of the hail damage on these young little soybeans. Because we did not work the soybean field, we planted it straight into vertical tilled ground. The emergence was relatively uneven. That isn't a big deal at all for soybeans, but that does create a lot of variability at the beginning of the growing season. You'll have a lot of different plants at different stages. Most of these soybeans, like this one right here, we're at V1 in their life cycle. That's the first stage of vegetative growth. The unifoliate, which I'm holding on both sides, unfolded, and we're starting to see a trifoliate emerge. Down below, we have our 2 cotyledons. On this plant, which I ripped out of the ground, half of one is missing, we have a whole one. If I hadn't removed this from the ground, this plant would be perfectly fine. What is really important to know about the anatomy of a young soybean seedling is that it is crucial, if it loses all of its photosynthetic area, that it retains at least one of its cotyledons. That is to say that if we chop off that top part of growth and all you have left is this, or even this, even a half a cotyledon is enough, it will regrow because it has these original seed leaves that provide energy and restart the plant's life. Well, unfortunately, that is not the case for a lot of these soybeans. I'll walk you through a couple plants right here. Well, these 2 right here are no-brainers. Little stubs, they're going to die. They've already started to turn a little bit necrotic on top, essentially dead in the water. This plant right here has 1 cotyledon attached. The rest of the plant was completely chopped off. It should, unless something really strange happens, be able to regrow. It'll be behind, not much behind the rest of the soybeans out in this field because they've all been devastated. We're going to see a lot of variability out in this field. Plants that will slowly recover from the injury, plants that aren't going to recover at all, and then every now and then there's a few that aren't really terribly damaged. When we discussed the potential of frost injury on our soybeans a couple weeks ago, I mentioned that the minute the soybean emerges, the growing point is out of the ground. Unlike corn, which stays below for quite a while, soybeans unfold and they're completely exposed to the environment. And in this case, they didn't like that exposure. There's a lot of survivors out here, but they're gonna have some scars. We are about half mile to the east. We're checking out another bean field. The boss joined us because he's also concerned. It's a little breezy outside. No surprise, more of the same. It appears visually that there's more damage out here. There's a lot of defoliation, not a ton of completely chopped off plants. As I say that, I spot one here. This little almost detached section of leaf may have enough umph in it to get the plant going again. It looks like a plant battleground out here. Assessing hail damage in a soybean field and evaluating what you're going to do moving forward is purely a numbers game. As I showed you, there are a few soybean plants out there in the field that are completely chopped off, and I would bet that they're probably clocked out for the season. So what we have to do moving forward is analyze our soybean stand or our plant population out in the field and decide if we need to replant. A viable stand of soybeans or an economic amount of plants out in the field is 90 to 100,000 plants per acre. When we drug the planter through the field 3 or 4 weeks ago, we had our population set on 165,000 plants per acre. That gives us quite a bit of room for error if we happen to have something like this happen. And that is a large reason why we plant such a large population. We can afford to lose 20 or 30% without taking a yield loss, although we would prefer not to lose any at all. The only thing we can do right now, though, is wait and see what happens with our soybeans out there and take a final assessment of how many viable plants we have out in the field. If we're at that 90 to 100,000 plants per acre mark, we will likely refrain from planting any additional soybeans out in the field. Obviously, there is a cost to replanting, and if all we're doing is throwing money to put extra plants that aren't needed, we aren't going to go do that. The only flaw in this logic, though, is that nothing is uniform, especially not out in the field, and not with weather like that. Though it does appear that that hail covered every single inch of ground. There is a large possibility that there are regions out in the field that are more hotspots in terms of hail damage. If that is the case and the soybeans are extremely thin, we may have to go back out and spot in individual places. At that point, though, if we're taking the planter out, we may be better off replanting the whole farm. One thing we will not do with the soybean fields is take a field cultivator out there and start fresh. The planter is perfectly capable of no-tilling out there, and we don't want to eliminate those original plants. They still have good yield potential, especially if they put on new growth. If you were in a scenario, though, where a cornfield was damaged across the entire farm, you would probably consider field cultivating it all up and starting fresh. We don't have to do that here. No blank slates needed, at least not at this point in time. We're just gonna have to sit and wait and see what develops. I've got one more farm I'm concerned about, and it is that direction. We're gonna cruise over there and see if it's injured. My dad and I were just discussing how this planting season and spring overall had been just too perfect. Virtually nothing at all had gone wrong for us, and typically that means that you're due for a correction in terms of fate. We're at the other farm here. There's still water standing. Not as much visible damage. We'll hop out and look at the corn. Soybeans are more important in terms of financial cost of hail damage. Corn is much easier though to spot the hail damage. So if you look at the cornfield, you have a good idea of what the soybeans look like. Definitely hailed out here on this farm. Not near as severe. Very noticeable leaf tissue damage. We've got trapdooring, leaves split in half. Overall though, not very many chopped off plants. The damage is limited, which is good. This corn's actually farther along here on this black dirt. Starting to put that second collar on. I'd call that V2. Progressing nicely. If it warm up, this stuff would grow faster. A little damage is better than a lot of damage. My final report on the storm for our farm, I'd say we had probably 2,000 acres of crops get hail on them, corn and soybeans combined. Of that 2,000 acres, a majority of that was very, very minuscule in terms of severity. About 300 acres, the farms we checked first, they look like they got steamrolled though. So a minor impact on a lot of acres and a major impact on a smaller portion of the farm. We're not exactly growing our corn and soybeans in a greenhouse. There's really not much we can do to prevent something like this from happening. It doesn't change my mind at all about us having our crops planted. I am very glad that they're all in the ground. I am also happy that this storm didn't really cause any kind of property damage. The hail was just not enough to cause any kind of valuable damage to anyone's personal property. I'll take that as a victory. We carry hail insurance much like other farmers to protect the value of our crops. I don't know that it's going to be that lucrative. The corn will most likely come out of that. The soybeans though, we'll have to wait and see. That's just part of life. When you have fields that look this good, nearly picture perfect, something's bound to happen. Sky's still a limit in terms of yield potential. 300 bushel corn, 100 bushel beans, here we come. Wind is just so unfriendly for video production. I want to make one last agronomic point about this hail damage before we go. It is very easy to see the physical ailments that our plant has. Plant tissue damage is obvious. What you don't see though are the long-term physiological consequences that will arise because of this event. Determining your plant population, no problem. Seeing what kind of diseases invade the plant because of all of this damaged tissue, well, there's no way to do that. The two long-term issues that these crops may run into are standability and disease pressure. When I say standability, I'm talking about how sturdy the plants are throughout the end of the growing season. Once they start to go through grain fill and put on a lot of weight up top on the plant, you will start to see plants buckle over because they cannot handle that weight. Normally this is not a problem. However, after tissue injury like this, the plant may not be able to return to 100%, and this very well may result in the plant not maintaining proper structure. The concerns about disease pressure can very easily be related to humans. If you or I were to get a wound, that is a very easy entryway for any type of pathogen to get into our bodies and start to reproduce. Well, plants suffer from the same fate. As we speak, all sorts of fungi, bacteria, and viruses could be taking over plant tissue, colonizing, and creating an environment within the plant that hurts our yield come harvest time. It is very hard to quantify the impact of that infestation It is something though that definitely will have an impact on our farm. For now, we'll just have to do what we normally do here on the farm, and that is wait and see how our crop develops and what kind of issues we have to deal with. In a couple of weeks, we should have a very good idea of what kind of stand we have out in the field. We'll evaluate that and decide if we have to do any replanting. Hopefully this is the last gift Mother Nature gives us this growing season. I'll catch you all in the next episode. Thank you for tuning in. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment down below if you have any questions. You know I love to talk about farming. Thank you guys. Have a great night. Peace.